Happy Sunday, everyone. Welcome to Our Issues Birmingham. I'm Tommy Spina. Today's guest is Richard Mauk. He's the Jefferson County Chair of what we think is the Alabama Democratic Party. Excuse me for hesitating, but there seems to be some confusion about exactly what is the Alabama Democratic Party.
There is confusion, Tom.
Which is why he's here.
And thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
So, I know you've been a guest before, and we've talked generally about the Democratic Party, which used to be King Rat in Alabama.
Absolutely, yes. Back when we were growing up.
But things have changed.
They have changed.
And so what's been in the news lately, and what I'd like to talk about today is, for starters, in this first segment, is a little historical recitation of the development of how we ended up in this quagmire of power struggle, I guess is the word.
It is a power struggle. And to be real quick, you have to go all the way back to the 1901 Alabama Constitution.
The 170 some odd amended?
Yes. That's when the white supremacists got reclaimed power and 1901 and disenfranchised black voters. They instituted the poll tax and all this other stuff to keep black people from voting. Along comes the 1965 Civil Rights Act that says you can't do poll taxes, you got to register people.
Lyndon Johnson.
Yeah, absolutely, Lyndon Johnson in 65. And even up until 1966, the ballot that you voted on said Democrats for white supremacy. 1966, when we were in grammar school, still had it on there.
High school.
Well, grammar school. So that's a little bit of historical perspective, and this is where the 60s and the civil rights movement birthed Dr. Joe Reed. Dr. Reed has been an outstanding leader his whole career in getting education to black folks and inclusion of black folks into society, into our culture, okay? And you've got to hand it to Dr. Reed for helping push AEA, the Democratic Party, Democratic Conference, and welding that into the current Alabama Democratic Executive Committee. Now, what does the committee do? We call elections. We say, okay, we're going to have a primary. Once that primary is over, we certify the candidates. Once the general election is over, we certify the winners. That's what happens with the Democratic Party. I do it here in Jefferson County locally for the tax assessor, tax collector, the treasurer, and the constables. So that's what I do locally.
And there's one of you in every
county.
67, one of 67 counties?
That is correct. Mostly now, not these days, but mostly in all the counties.
Well, I'll save this question for later, but what I was wondering was, are all 67 counties on board with what appears to be the new hierarchy?
And the answer to that question is we don't know. County parties are not represented on the state party. You can't hold a dual office like our friend Bill Dawson sits on the STEC state party and also sits on the county party. Okay, and so they form a group that recommend to me policy, recommend to me budgets. I raise money for local candidates, and going back to the state party, there's the rub. And as you said earlier, they were King Cotton, so to speak, in Alabama for 100 years.
Very well put.
When you and I were in law school, you had Senator Heflin running for the Senate. You had Fob James running for governor. You had that was probably the high crest mark of the Democratic Party in Alabama.
What year was that?
78.
Oh, yeah.
That's when Wallace retired, was going to run for Senate, Governor Wallace, was going to run for Senate, decided not to, and Heflin was elected, Don Stewart was elected to the Senate.
Oh, wow.
So, you had all that going on. Bill Baxley was running for governor. Fob James defeated him in a narrow race. And back then, it was still, in 1978, it was the Democratic Party's was the main ball. It was the main party. The Republicans didn't even have a primary until we were in high school. Okay? They just met together at the Tutwiler Hotel and picked candidates to run. So this is a recent phenomenon.
Now that has totally
changed. Totally changed. Just all on one side now. So you had no Democratic candidates winning statewide. Jefferson County is, of course, the exception.
Back then.
Yeah, back then. So anyway, you had all this, and you slowly had the Reagan phenomenon that swept aside an evangelical Democratic Jimmy Carter. And it was a phenomenon that we're still looking and studying, that the evangelical vote started going more toward the Republican Party. So you have all this coming together right now. And we have a Democratic Party, and we're going to get back to that. We have a Democratic Party that has lost influence. It has lost the ability to make money, to raise money. It has lost the ability to incorporate new technologies, new applications, to apply to voter registration, to apply to voter thoughts and IDs. So you've got all this.
Voter turnout.
Voter turnout. See, Dr. Reed, in the 70s and up to 1986. Dr. Reed,
first name?
Dr. Joe Reed, wielded a lot of power in the Democratic Party and in state government.
Back in those days.
And he has not allowed younger folks to come and join in the party.
All right. Hold that thought. We're going to get where we're going. I know we are. This is good stuff. This is Our Issues Birmingham. We'll be right back. Do not go away. Welcome back to Our Issues Birmingham. I'm Tommy Spina. We're talking with Richard Mauk. We're trying to unravel where the Democratic Party came from and how it got to be where it is now, if it is in fact anywhere right now. So as we were going to break, you were telling me about the power that Joe Reed wielded within the Democratic Party up until
1986.
And what happened?
In 1986, you had a Democratic primary, which was the only game in town.
Still in 86.
And still in 86 is Democratic primary. You had the Attorney General, I forget his name.
Graddick?
Charlie Graddick, thank you. And Bill Baxley, former.
Where did that come from?
I don't know, senior moment.
Who needs Google?
So you had those two going at it, and they made the runoff. And in the runoff, Charlie Graddick got enough Republicans to cross over and vote him in the runoff, and he became the nominee of the Democratic Party.
As a Democrat?
As a Democrat. The state Democratic Party held a hearing and decided he was not a real Democrat and kicked him off the ballot. And people were so outraged over this that they voted for the Amway salesman from Coleman. And that was Governor
Guy
Hunt, who served 2 terms. And the Democrats were just like, how can this guy get reelected? Well, it's real easy. When you just smile and wave and don't
smile and shoe shine.
And smile and shoe shine, that's it. People don't necessarily hate you, but the Democrats started getting a bad reputation from then on. They were elitist.
Well, he was Republican, though.
He was Republican. That's when the first Republican governor was elected since Reconstruction.
And who did he beat?
He beat, I believe, Bill Baxley.
Mm-hmm.
They awarded the nomination to Bill. Hunt beat him, and then I forget who he beat the second time. But Dr. Reed was all powerful at this time. They're all during this series of elections, and he decided that he would file a lawsuit because he looked at the Democratic state party in late 80s, early 90s and said, we have too many white folks that are Democrats in all these other counties. We need more inclusion. We need more black folks on the SDEC. And so he filed a lawsuit, and they settled. The then chair of the Democratic Party settled with Dr. Reed and agreed at that time to allow Dr. Reed to appoint more members to the SDEC than were actually elected generally. So Dr. Reed appoints, last time he appointed 35 people at-large delegates to the state Democratic Party. After those people were selected by the minority caucus, they came and joined the ranks of the state Democratic Executive Committee. Now let's fast forward real quick to 2016. 2016, we had an election. You had people from the state Democratic Executive Committee elected from their different different districts, male and female. You have 135 people, I think, elected to this legislature. You have 270 elected to the SDEC.
Oh, you're talking about on the governing board.
Yeah, on the governing board. And then Dr. Reed adds on 35 to 50 on top of that. So we had an election. Well, keep in mind this also, we had a special election in 2016, and Doug Jones was elected.
Right.
Without any help from the Democratic Party.
Now, at this point in time, Nancy Worley and Randy Kelly are the chair and vice chair of the state Democratic Party. Am I correct?
No. During the election for Doug Jones, Nancy Worley was the chair and Redding Pitt was the executive vice chair.
Redding died.
And Redding died, and Randy was elected to take his place. So now you have Nancy Worley and Reverend Randy Kelly, Dr. Kelly, as the chair and vice chair of the party. They did not help the Jones campaign with money, with technology, with volunteers, with nothing.
Why?
We don't know. We don't understand why, but they did not.
They didn't approve of his candidacy?
We don't know. We do not know why they failed to do that.
I'll just leave it.
But they did.
I don't know.
Anyway, so Nancy.
You don't know what you don't know. You don't know.
Right. So in August they have the elections for state Democratic Party chair. Dr. Reed appoints 35 additional members. We take a vote. I'm there as a witness, and the chair Worley wins by 12 votes after the 35 were added on. And then we're filming this the whole time. We determine that they were allowing people to vote that weren't credentialed. People were just walking up, being handed a credential and going and voting. That is why we filed a complaint with the Democratic National Committee, and Chair Tom Perez decided this had merit and brought it before one of the subcommittees. They watched the movie, the film.
The show.
They took, and they decided as Chairman Perez said, it was a circus. It was illegitimate. There's no legality about it at all.
All right. What year are we in?
We are now current. We are now 2016, 2018.
All right. We're going to come back from break, and we're going to talk about what's happened just in the last
6 months.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
And get there. So this is Our Issues Birmingham, and I'm Tommy Spina talking with the Jefferson County Chair of the Democratic Party, trying to get some understanding of what in the world is going on a state level. We'll be right back. Do not go away. Welcome back to Our Issues Birmingham. We are talking about the Democratic Party. I'm Tommy Spina, Richard Mauk, a wealth of information. We are now current up to the last 6 months with what has gone on and gotten us to where, when I say us, I'm talking about the Democratic Party, gotten the Democratic Party to where it is now. So What happened 6 months ago?
Thank you, Tommy. Several folks that are on the state Democratic Executive Committee filed a complaint with the Democratic National Committee that the election of Nancy Worley and Randy Kelly was void. It was illegal.
And this is as a result of the circus that you described in the
Correct.
last segment.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That is because of that. They have a hearing. The Credentials Committee has a hearing. The Delegate Selection Plan Committee has a hearing on their plan. And they have a meeting and invite Nancy and Randy up there to talk. And they decide, the DNC decides that y'all are illegitimate. We're not going to recognize y'all. That's it. And you need to pass some more bylaws that are more in tune with the Democratic Party's national charter, which means having a diverse electorate, having LGBTQ people, have Asians, have Hispanics, have women, and have youth represented on the party. And at this, right now, the old guard, let's call them the old guard and the new guard. The old guard has 50+% of the delegates or the executive committee. And they're African American, and their average is 65 years old and older.
The old guard?
The old guard, 65 plus.
Now, is that the Nancy Worley faction?
That would be the Nancy Worley faction. That's
Okay.
the old guard versus the new guard.
Mm-hmm.
The new guard and the DNC said, we want you to hold a meeting, to call a meeting. We want you to pass new bylaws. And by the way, here are the bylaws we want you to pass. If you pass these, we'll approve them. And we want you to hold a new election. Well, Nancy never would do it, never would do it, never would do it. Some members of the new guard got together and asked people to come forward and sign a letter asking for a meeting to be called. Under the old bylaws, if 50% of the members ask to call a meeting is called.
So that happened.
That happened. 50% of the members said, we want a meeting, and we're going to meet on October whatever. They met without Nancy Worley, without Dr. Reed, without anybody from the old guard.
But not in secret. Nancy.
Not in secret.
They knew. They just chose not to participate.
They chose not to participate. At that meeting, they passed new bylaws and called for an election. Then they adjourned. Then Nancy calls a meeting.
Does she have 50%?
She does not have 50%.
So
she
that
calls
meeting,
the meeting,
she just called her own
she
meeting.
called her own meeting. She passed new bylaws as well.
Inconsistent with the National Committee's
yes,
bylaws.
Inconsistent with what the DNC said. And then the new guard met, had a meeting, and elected new chairs.
Which are Chris England.
Chris England and Pat Todd.
Out of Chris is Tuscaloosa state
Yes.
rep, and Pat is a former state legislator.
Former state rep from Birmingham. So those two are now recognized by the DNC as the legitimate chair and vice chair of the Democratic Party of Alabama.
However, the story doesn't end there because
Nancy Worley files a lawsuit.
Yes, because she doesn't recognize the new chair and the
she tried to get the
vice chair.
Right. She tried to get the circuit judge in Montgomery to issue a restraining order to keep the new guard from meeting. And he did. He issued a restraining order at 5 o'clock on the Friday before the meeting, which is on the next day, Saturday. Barry Ragsdale, the state party, the new guard's attorney, filed a motion with the Alabama Supreme Court, which then, at around an hour later, lifted the restraining order and allowed the people to go ahead and meet.
And vote.
And vote. And they did. Nancy then calls another meeting to come to Montgomery a week or two ago. And this is the old guard, the Worley Reed faction. And they elect Nancy and Randy chair and vice chair again.
So now we have An old faction and a new faction.
We have an old faction and a new faction, and it's all sitting in circuit court in Montgomery.
And one of which is recognized by the National Democratic Party,
Correct.
And one of which is not.
That is correct.
And
that's where we are.
Now we're filming this in the end of November, and that's where things are right now. So
that is correct.
So
we are sitting here not knowing who the real Democratic Party is.
So as we start to end this show, do you have any predictions for what lies ahead for the future?
If there's any indication by the Alabama Supreme Court in former case law, the courts do not have jurisdiction over internal party matters. So the motion that Nancy filed with the circuit court should be thrown out, based on precedent, based on other cases that the Supreme Court has said there is no jurisdiction.
And once that happens, will she go away?
I doubt it.
Okay, there you have it, folks. A paradigm of clarity.
Thank you for having me, Tommy.
I'm glad you were with us. Well, the future remains to be seen. Doug Jones is running with the blessing of the new faction.
Yes.
And the non-recognition of the old faction.
That's
I
correct.
trust.
That is correct.
And who his opposition will be remains to be seen.
That's correct. But not in the Democratic Party. No one qualified against him in the Democratic Party.
So we don't have to worry about primary.
We don't have to worry about a primary.
All right. This is Our Issues Birmingham. I hope this has been as informative for you as it has been for me. I have somewhat of a grasp on what's going on now. We will see you next week. Thanks for being with us.